Part 1. The fall. The wind was howling like a wild animal when David stepped onto the icy ledge. He had been climbing alone for 3 days now, something most people would call crazy. But David wasn't most people. At 42 years old, he had spent more time talking to mountains than to humans. The snow was coming down harder than he expected. Each flake felt like tiny needles against his face. His hands were getting numb even inside his thick gloves. Maybe he should have checked the weather. Report one more time before starting this climb. Just a little bit more, he whispered to himself. The same words he had been saying for the past hour. David owned a small business guiding tourists up the easier mountains. During tourist season, he would take families and adventure seekers on safe trails. But when winter came and the tourists went home, David would challenge himself on the dangerous peaks. These solo climbs were his way of feeling alive. He lived in a tiny cabin at the bottom of the mountain. No wife, no kids, no pets. Just him and his climbing gear. His neighbors barely knew his name. The grocery store clerk would nod when he bought his weekly supplies, but that was about as social as David got. His boots crunched in the snow as he moved carefully along the narrow path. The cliff dropped down hundreds of feet on his left side. One wrong step meant certain death. But David had done this 1,000 times before. He trusted his skills more than he trusted people. That trust almost killed him. The rock that looked solid wasn't solid at all. When David put his full weight on it, the stone crumbled like old bread. His hands grabbed for anything to hold on to, but there was nothing. For a few terrifying seconds, he was falling through the air. His body hit the rocky slope hard. Pain shot through his chest like lightning. He rolled and bounced down the mountain, his backpack tearing on the sharp rocks. When he finally stopped rolling, everything went quiet except for the sound of his own heavy breathing. David tried to move his legs. Nothing happened. He tried to sit up, but his ribs felt like they were on fire. Blood was dripping from a cut on his forehead, and he could taste copper in his mouth. "Help," he called out, but his voice was weak. Who was going to hear him anyway? He was miles away from the nearest trail. The snow was falling faster now, and soon it would cover his tracks. Completely. Hours passed like years. David drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes he thought he heard voices, but it was just the wind playing tricks on his confused mind. His body was getting colder and colder. He knew what that meant. Hypothermia was setting in. In his clearer moments, David thought about his life. What would people say when they found his body? Would anyone even miss him? His bank account would just sit there. His cabin would stay empty. His climbing gear would collect dust. He had always been proud of his independence. While other people dealt with relationship drama and family problems, David had the pure simplicity of man versus mountain. No complications, no heartbreak, no disappointments. Just him and the challenge. But lying there in the snow, bleeding and broken, David realized how empty that independence really was. He had spent so many years avoiding the mess of human connections that he had forgotten what it felt like to matter to someone. On the second day, David started hallucinating. He thought he saw his mother, who had died 5 years ago. She was telling him to fight, to stay awake, to keep breathing. But staying awake was getting harder and harder. By the third day, David had given up hope. His water bottle was frozen solid. His emergency food was scattered somewhere down the mountain. His cell phone had been smashed in the fall. Even if he could move, which he couldn't, he had no idea which direction would lead him to safety. That's when he heard the helicopter. At first, David thought it was another hallucination, but the sound got louder and louder. Real voices were calling his name. How did they know to look for him? Later, David would learn that Lisa, a nurse from the town clinic, had called for a search when he didn't show up for a supply pickup he had scheduled. She had been the emergency contact on his climbing permit, something he had forgotten about completely. Lisa barely knew David. He had helped her late husband plan a memorial climb 2 years ago, and they had exchanged phone numbers, just in case. She probably saved his life with that phone call. The rescue team found David unconscious and nearly frozen. His body temperature had dropped dangerously low. 3 of his ribs were broken, His left leg was fractured in 2 places, and he had internal bleeding that required emergency surgery. The helicopter ride to the hospital was a blur of faces and medical equipment. David kept fading in and out of consciousness. Sometimes he could hear the medical team talking about his condition in worried voices. "He's lucky to be alive," one of them said. Lucky. David had never thought of himself as lucky before. When David finally woke up in the hospital bed, everything hurt. There were tubes in his arms and machines beeping around him. A doctor with kind eyes explained his injuries and the long recovery ahead of him. "You'll need several months of physical therapy," the doctor said, "and climbing again might not be possible, at least not like before." David stared at the ceiling tiles and tried to process this information. If he couldn't climb, what was he? Who was he? His whole identity was built around being the guy who could conquer any mountain. For weeks, David lay in that hospital bed thinking about his life. The nurses were nice, but they were just doing their jobs. He had no family to visit him, no close friends to bring him flowers or magazines. Just him and his thoughts. Lisa, the nurse who had called for his rescue, stopped by a few times. She would sit in the chair next to his bed and tell him about her day at the clinic. David learned that she was raising 3 kids by herself after her husband died in a car accident. She worked double shifts to pay the bills and still found time to check on a lonely man she barely knew. "Why did you call for help?" David asked her one afternoon. Lisa smiled and adjusted his blanket. "Because everyone deserves to have someone who notices when they don't come home." Those words hit David harder than his fall down the mountain. Someone who notices when they don't come home. He had spent his whole adult life making sure nobody would notice, and now he realized how sad that really was. The medical bills were piling up like snow in a blizzard. David's small savings account was disappearing fast. His climbing business was obviously finished for now, maybe forever. He started to panic about money, about his future, about everything. But lying there in that hospital bed, broken and scared, David also felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt grateful. Grateful that Lisa had cared enough to make that phone call. Grateful that the rescue team had risked their own safety to find him. Grateful for every breath he was still taking. Maybe being completely independent wasn't as great as he had always thought. Maybe needing people wasn't a weakness after all. Maybe there was more to life than just surviving alone on a mountaintop. David didn't know it yet, but his real adventure was just beginning. The fall that nearly killed him was about to give him something he never knew he wanted: a family. Part 2. An unexpected proposal. David had been in the hospital for almost a month when Lisa walked into his room with a strange look on her face. She wasn't wearing her usual smile, and she kept fidgeting with her hands like she was nervous about something. "How are you feeling today?" she asked, but David could tell she had something else on her mind. "Same as yesterday," David replied. Broken. The medical bills had become a nightmare. Physical therapy, surgery costs, medication, and room charges were adding up faster than David could count. His insurance covered some of it, but not nearly enough. He was looking at debt that would take years to pay off, assuming he could ever work again. Lisa sat down in the familiar chair next to his bed. She had been visiting almost every day, sometimes bringing him books or just sitting quietly while he stared out the window. David still didn't understand why she cared so much about a stranger. "I need to talk to you about something," Lisa said. "It might sound crazy, but hear me out." David turned his head to look at her properly. Her brown hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she looked tired. He had learned that she worked long shifts at the clinic and then went home to take care of her 3 children alone. "I've been thinking about both of our situations," Lisa continued. "You need help recovering, and you're worried about money. I need help with my kids, and I'm worried about money too." David waited for her to continue. He had no idea where this conversation was going. "My husband's military benefits are running out next month," Lisa explained. "I'm working as many hours as I can, but it's not enough. The kids need new clothes, school supplies, and Amy needs braces. I'm behind on the mortgage, and I don't know how much longer I can keep this up." David knew that Lisa's husband had died in Afghanistan 2 years ago. She had mentioned it once, but she didn't like talking about sad things. She preferred to focus on today rather than yesterday. "What are you saying?" David asked. Lisa took a deep breath. "I'm saying maybe we could help each other. You need someone to take care of you while you recover. I need health insurance and financial stability for my family. We could get married." David thought he must have heard wrong. "Married? Not a real marriage," Lisa said quickly. "I mean, legally real, but not romantic. Just a practical arrangement. You would get someone to help you through physical therapy and daily tasks. I would get health insurance through your business, and we could combine our resources to make ends meet." David stared at her like she had just suggested they rob a bank together. "Lisa, that's insane." "Is it?" she asked. "People used to get married for practical reasons all the time. Love marriages are actually pretty new in human history. This would just be two people helping each other through difficult times." David's head was spinning. A month ago, he was a loner who talked to mountains instead of people. Now someone was proposing marriage to him. Even a fake marriage seemed impossible to imagine. "What about your kids?" David asked. "They don't even know me. They know you helped plan the memorial climb for their father," Lisa said. "And they know you're the man who saved their mom from worrying about a stranger dying alone on a mountain." "I didn't save anyone," David protested. "You saved me by calling for help." Lisa smiled for the first time that day. "See? We're already helping each other." David spent the next week thinking about Lisa's proposal. It made logical sense, but logic and emotions were two different things. He had avoided commitments his whole life because they seemed complicated and messy. This would be the ultimate commitment. But what were his other options? He could go back to his empty cabin, struggle through recovery alone, and probably go bankrupt paying medical bills. He could try to restart his climbing business, but his injuries meant he might never be able to guide people safely again. "Tell me about your kids," David said during Lisa's next visit. Lisa's face lit up the way it always did when she talked about her children. "Amy is 12, and she's scary smart. Sometimes I think she's smarter than me. She loves math and science, and she wants to be an engineer when she grows up. She's also very protective of her little brother and sister since her father died. Tom is 9, and he's full of energy. He plays soccer, collects rocks, and asks about a million questions every day. He's the kind of kid who can make friends with anyone in 5 minutes. And Bella is 5. She's my little artist. She draws pictures constantly and leaves them all over the house. She still asks when Daddy is coming home sometimes." David could hear the love in Lisa's voice when she talked about her children. It was obvious that they were the center of her world. How could he fit into that picture? What would they think about this arrangement? David asked. "I've talked to them about it," Lisa said. "I explained that you're hurt and need help and that we need help too. Amy understands the practical side. Tom thinks it would be cool to have a man around the house again. Bella just wants to know if you like coloring." "Do I like coloring?" David had never thought about it. "I guess you'll find out," Lisa laughed. The more David thought about it, the more the arrangement made sense. He had always been good at solving problems, and this was just a problem that needed solving. Two people with complementary needs could form a partnership to benefit everyone involved. But David was also scared. What if he was terrible at being around kids? What if Lisa realized she had made a mistake? What if he got attached to this family and then something went wrong? "What happens if one of us wants out?" David asked during another conversation. "Then we figure it out like adults," Lisa said. "We write up an agreement beforehand so everyone knows what to expect. We try it for a year and see how it goes. And if you meet someone you actually want to marry?" Lisa was quiet for a moment. "David, I buried the love of my life 2 years ago. I'm not looking for romance. I'm looking for stability for my children. That's all I can handle right now." David understood that feeling. He wasn't looking for love either. Love seemed risky and unpredictable, but partnership, cooperation, mutual benefit, those were things he could understand. "Okay," David said finally. "Let's do it." Lisa looked surprised, like she hadn't expected him to actually agree. Really? Really. But we do this right. We write everything down. We set clear expectations, we figure out the financial details, and we tell the kids exactly what this is and what it isn't. Lisa nodded. Fair enough. They spent the next 2 weeks planning everything like they were organizing a business merger. David would move into Lisa's house when he was discharged from the hospital. He would contribute his savings and his business income to the household expenses. Lisa would help him with physical therapy and daily tasks while he recovered. The kids would keep their routines and their rooms. David would respect Lisa's parenting decisions. Everyone would be honest about how the arrangement was working. Wedding took place in the hospital chapel 2 days before David was discharged. It was the smallest wedding possible. Just David, Lisa, 2 witnesses, and a hospital chaplain who had agreed to perform the ceremony. Lisa wore a simple blue dress she had bought at a thrift store. David wore the only clean shirt he had. There were no flowers, no music, no family members crying happy tears. Just 2 practical people making a practical decision. Do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? The chaplain asked. I do, David said. And he meant it. Maybe not in the traditional way, but he was committed to making this work. Do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do, Lisa replied with a small smile. They exchanged simple gold bands that Lisa had picked up at a jewelry store. When the chaplain pronounced them husband and wife, they shook hands instead of kissing. Well, that's done, Lisa said as they signed the marriage certificate. Yeah, David agreed. Now what? Now we go home and see if this crazy plan actually works. David was about to become part of a family for the first time in his adult life. He had no idea what he was doing, but for once, he wasn't facing the challenge alone. Part 3. Learning to be a family. David's first morning in Lisa's house felt like waking up on another planet. Instead of silence, there were voices everywhere. Kids asking questions, a coffee maker gurgling, cartoon sounds from the TV, and footsteps running up and down the stairs. He sat on the edge of the couch where he had slept, trying to process all the noise. His physical therapist had told him to take things slowly, but nobody had prepared him for the chaos of family life. Good morning, Lisa said, appearing in the doorway with a cup of coffee. She was already dressed for work, her hair perfect and her scrubs crisp. David had no idea how she managed to look so put together with 3 kids running around. Is it always this loud? David asked, accepting the coffee gratefully. Lisa laughed. This is actually pretty quiet for a Monday morning. Wait until you see a Saturday. Amy, the 12-year-old, walked through the living room on her way to the kitchen. She glanced at David but didn't say anything. She had been polite but distant since David moved in 3 days ago. Not rude, just careful. Tom, the 9-year-old, was more direct. He had asked David 100 questions already. Can you teach me to climb rocks? Do you have any cool scars? Why do you walk funny? Can you fix my bike? Do you know any bear stories? Bella, the 5-year-old, mostly watched David from a safe distance. She would peek around corners and duck behind furniture when he looked her way. She reminded David of a shy forest animal. Amy's making breakfast, Lisa said. She's very responsible, maybe too responsible sometimes. She's been taking care of everyone since her father died. David could hear 12-year-old Amy in the kitchen, telling her siblings to brush their teeth and find their backpacks. It didn't seem right for a kid to have so much responsibility. Maybe I could help with some of that, David offered. That would be great, but don't push too hard, Lisa warned. Amy doesn't trust easily, especially with men. She's protecting everyone, including me. After Lisa left for work, David found himself alone with 3 children for the first time. Amy was getting ready for school with military efficiency. Tom was looking for his soccer cleats and asking David to help. Bella was sitting at the table, drawing a picture of what looked like a purple dinosaur. I can tie my own shoes, Amy announced when she saw David approaching with Tom's soccer cleats. I'm sure you can, David said. I was just helping Tom find these. Amy studied David's face like she was trying to figure out if he was lying. Tom can find his own shoes too. We don't need help with everything. David sat down carefully at the kitchen table. His ribs still hurt when he moved too quickly. You're right, You guys have been taking care of yourselves just fine. I'm still learning how things work around here." "Why did you marry our mom?" Amy asked suddenly. Tom stopped looking for his second cleat and turned to listen. Even Bella looked up from her drawing. David had been dreading this question, but Lisa had told him to be honest with the kids. "Because we both needed help and we thought we could help each other." "Do you love her?" Amy's question was direct and challenging. "I care about her, and I care about all of you," David said carefully. "Love is complicated. Sometimes it takes time to grow." Amy seemed satisfied with that answer, or at least she stopped interrogating him. Tom found his cleat under the couch and went back to getting ready for school. "What are you drawing?" David asked Bella. She held up her picture shyly. "It's a dragon, but a nice dragon. He protects people instead of hurting them." "That's a very good dragon," David said. "I like his purple color." Bella smiled for the first time since David had moved in. The first few weeks were like learning a complicated dance. David was used to doing everything on his own schedule, but family life had a rhythm he didn't understand yet. Dinner happened at 6 o'clock whether he was hungry or not. The kids had homework that needed checking. Bedtime routines involved stories and teeth brushing and finding stuffed animals. David made mistakes constantly. He forgot to check if Tom had brushed his teeth. He let Bella eat cookies before dinner. He tried to help Amy with math homework and realized she was already better at it than he was. "You don't have to be perfect," Lisa told him one evening after a particularly difficult day. "I'm not perfect either. We're all just figuring this out together." But David wanted to be useful. He had agreed to this arrangement to help, not to be another burden for Lisa to manage. Slowly, David found ways to contribute. He couldn't do physical activities yet, but he could listen. When Tom came home upset because a kid at school had made fun of his old sneakers, David sat with him and talked about how some people say mean things when they feel bad about themselves. When Amy was struggling with a science project, David shared stories about weather patterns he had observed in the mountains. She started asking him more questions about his climbing experiences, not because she wanted to be friends, but because she was genuinely curious about how things worked in nature. Bella was the hardest to reach. She would come close sometimes, showing David her drawings or asking him to help her reach something high up. But then she would disappear again, like she was testing whether he would still be there the next time she needed something. "She's afraid you'll leave like her daddy did," Lisa explained one night after the kids were in bed. "She doesn't understand that her father didn't choose to go away." David thought about that conversation for days. He had never considered what it felt like to be a child who had lost a parent. These kids had learned not to trust too quickly because trust could be taken away without warning. The breakthrough came on a rainy Saturday morning. David was sitting at the kitchen table doing exercises his physical therapist had assigned. His leg was propped up on a chair, and he was trying to stretch his ankle in circles. Bella wandered into the kitchen and watched him silently. "Does it hurt?" she asked finally. "A little bit," David admitted. "But the exercises help it get better." "I hurt my knee once," Bella said. "Mommy put a Band-Aid on it." "Band-Aids are very good for fixing things," David agreed. Bella disappeared and came back with a box of colorful Band-Aids. "These might help your hurt places." She very carefully placed a Band-Aid with cartoon flowers on David's forehead, where a small scar was still visible from his fall. Then she put one with smiling suns on his hand. "There," she said proudly. "Now you're getting better faster." David looked down at the cheerful Band-Aids and felt something crack open in his chest. "Thank you, Bella. I feel better already." From that day forward, Bella would check on David's hurt places and apply Band-Aids whenever she thought they were needed. It became their special routine. Tom started including David in his rock collection, bringing home interesting stones and asking David to identify them. David didn't know much about geology, but he enjoyed Tom's enthusiasm and learned along with him. Amy remained cautious, but she stopped acting like David was an intruder. She would ask him practical questions about adult things like insurance and taxes. David realized she was trying to understand how families worked financially because she was worried about security. "Your mom is really good at managing money," David told Amy one day. "We're all going to be fine." "How do you know?" Amy asked. "Because your mom is smart, and I'm stubborn, and together we can figure out anything," David said. Amy almost smiled at that. The house was starting to feel less foreign to David. He learned that Tom needed extra time to find his soccer gear. He discovered that Amy did her best thinking while walking around the house. He figured out that Bella communicated through her artwork more than her words. David also learned that Lisa worried about everything. She worried about money, about her kids, about whether David was happy with their arrangement, about whether she was being a good wife and mother, about whether she was making the right decisions. "You're doing great," David told her one evening. "All of you are." "How can you tell?" Lisa asked. "Because your kids feel safe enough to be themselves around me," David said. "That means you've taught them how to trust their instincts while still being careful. That's not easy." Lisa looked surprised by his observation. "I never thought about it that way." David was learning that families were more complicated than climbing mountains, but also more rewarding. Every small success felt like reaching a summit. When Tom hugged him goodnight without being asked. When Amy let him help her carry groceries. When Bella drew a picture of their family that included him. He was also learning that being needed felt different than being independent. Instead of only worrying about his own safety and success, David found himself thinking about whether the kids had eaten enough lunch, whether Amy was stressed about school, whether Tom's cough was getting worse, whether Bella was having nightmares. It was exhausting and terrifying and wonderful all at the same time. 3 months after moving in, David realized he hadn't thought about climbing a mountain in weeks. Instead, he was thinking about helping Tom practice soccer and teaching Amy how to change a tire and making sure Bella had enough purple crayons for her dragon drawings. He was becoming part of something bigger than himself. And for the first time in his life that didn't scare him, it felt like coming home. Part 4. Earning the name. Papa David woke up to the sound of coughing. It was 3 a.m, and Lisa's side of the bed was empty. They had started sharing the bedroom a month ago when David's mobility improved enough that he didn't need to sleep on the couch anymore. It was still a practical arrangement. Lisa got better sleep without kids wandering in at all hours, and David felt less like a guest in someone else's house. He found Lisa in the bathroom, bent over the sink and struggling to breathe. Her face was flushed with fever and she was shaking. "How long have you been feeling sick?" David asked, putting a hand on her forehead. She was burning up. "A few days," Lisa whispered. "I thought it was just a cold." David had watched Lisa push through exhaustion for months. She worked double shifts at the clinic, came home to cook dinner and help with homework, stayed up late doing laundry and paying bills. She never slowed down, never asked for help, never admitted when she was overwhelmed. "You need to see a doctor," David said. "I can't," Lisa protested weakly. "The kids have school tomorrow. Tom has soccer practice. Amy has that science test she's worried about. I'll handle the kids," David said, though the words scared him even as he said them. "You need medical attention." Lisa was too sick to argue. David called her supervisor at the clinic, packed a bag and drove Lisa to the emergency room. By the time they arrived, she was barely conscious. "Pneumonia," the doctor explained after examining Lisa. "She needs to be admitted for treatment. She's severely dehydrated and her breathing is compromised." David sat in the hospital waiting room, staring at his phone. In a few hours, 3 kids would wake up expecting their mother to be there. Instead, they would find David, who still felt like he was playing house most of the time. He drove home as the sun was coming up, rehearsing different ways to explain the situation. But when he walked into the kitchen, Amy was already awake and making breakfast. "Where's Mom?" she asked immediately, her radar for problems as sharp as ever. "She's in the hospital," David said gently. "She has pneumonia, but she's going to be okay. The doctors are taking good care of her." Amy's face went pale. "Is she going to die?" The question hit David like a punch to the stomach. Of course Amy would think that. Her father had gone to the hospital and never came home. "No," David said firmly. She's not going to die. Pneumonia is serious, but it's treatable. She just needs rest and medicine. Tom appeared in the doorway, his hair sticking up in every direction. What's pneumonia? It's when your lungs get infected and it's hard to breathe, David explained, like when you have a really bad cold but worse. Bella wandered in next, dragging her favorite stuffed rabbit. She looked around the room and asked, "Where's Mommy?" David knelt down to Bella's level. "Mommy is sick, so she's staying at the hospital where the doctors can help her feel better. But I'm here to take care of you." "Are you going to leave too?" Bella asked in a small voice. "No," David said without hesitation. "I'm not going anywhere." The next few days tested every parenting skill David didn't know he had. Amy tried to take over all of Lisa's responsibilities, making lists and organizing everyone's schedules. David had to convince her that it was okay to be 12 years old instead of a substitute mother. Tom asked constant questions about hospitals and sickness and whether people could catch pneumonia from their moms. David answered as honestly as he could while trying not to scare anyone. Bella clung to David like he might disappear if she let go. She followed him from room to room, helped him with tasks she was too small to actually help with, and insisted on sleeping on a mattress on the floor next to David's side of the bed. "I miss Mommy," Bella said on the third night. "I miss her too," David admitted. "But she's getting stronger every day. Will you read me a story?" David had never read bedtime stories before living with this family. Lisa usually handled the nighttime routine, but he picked up one of Bella's favorite books and did his best with the funny voices. "You're getting better at the dragon voice," Bella said sleepily. "I've been practicing," David said. School pickup was a disaster the first day. David forgot about Tom's soccer practice and arrived an hour late to find Tom sitting alone with his coach. He mixed up Amy's schedule and packed her lunch for a day when she was supposed to buy cafeteria food. But David learned quickly. By the end of the week, he had mastered the morning routine, figured out everyone's favorite foods, and even helped Amy study for her science test. "You're getting good at this dad stuff," Tom said one evening while David was helping him organize his rock collection. David paused. "Dad stuff?" "Yeah, you know. Taking care of us and making sure we're okay and answering all my questions even when they're annoying." David felt that familiar crack in his chest, the feeling that happened more and more often when the kids said things that caught him off guard. "I like answering your questions." "Good, because I have about 1,000,000 more." The real test came on Friday night when Bella developed a fever. David had never dealt with a sick child before. He called the doctor's office, gave Bella children's medicine, and stayed up all night checking her temperature. Around 2 a.m, Bella woke up crying from a bad dream. "I dreamed the hospital people wouldn't give Mommy back," she sobbed. David picked her up and held her while she cried. Her small body felt so fragile in his arms. "That was just a scary dream," David said. "The hospital people are helping Mommy get better so she can come home to us." "Promise?" Bella asked. "Promise," David said, though he knew you should never promise things you couldn't control. But sometimes kids needed promises more than they needed absolute honesty. Bella sniffled and wiped her nose on David's shirt. "Papa?" David's heart stopped. "What did you call me?" "Papa," Bella said matter-of-factly. "That's what you are." David sat there in the dark, holding a 5-year-old who had just given him a title he never thought he wanted. Papa, not David, not Mom's husband, not the man who lived in their house, Papa. "Is that okay?" Bella asked, sensing his silence. "That's more than okay," David whispered. "That's perfect." When Lisa finally came home from the hospital 4 days later, she found a house that was running smoothly without her. David had maintained everyone's routines, kept up with laundry, helped with homework, and even remembered to water her plants. More importantly, the kids seemed calm and secure. They had missed their mother desperately, but they hadn't fallen apart without her. "How did it go?" Lisa asked after the kids had smothered her with hugs and gone to bed. "Better than I expected," David said. "They're amazing kids." "They are," Lisa agreed. "But you're pretty amazing too. I never thought I'd be able to leave them with someone and not worry." You don't have to worry about them with me, David said. They're safe with me, always. Lisa studied his face. You've changed, you know, from when we first made this arrangement. How? You used to look like you were visiting our life. Now you look like you're living it. David thought about that. She was right. Somewhere between Band-Aid applications and soccer practices and bedtime stories, this had stopped being Lisa's family that he was helping. It had become his family, too. Bella called me Papa tonight, David said. Lisa's eyes filled with tears. How do you feel about that? Scared, David admitted. And honored. And like I have something worth protecting now. You do, Lisa said softly. You all do. That night, David lay awake thinking about how much his life had changed. 6 months ago, his biggest responsibility was keeping himself alive on a mountain. Now he was responsible for 3 children who trusted him to be there when they needed him. The weight of that responsibility should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like the most important job he had ever had. When morning came, Tom bounded into the bedroom with questions about rock formations. Amy appeared with a permission slip that needed signing. Bella climbed onto the bed with her stuffed rabbit and announced that she was going to draw a picture of their family. Make sure you put Papa in it, she told her crayons seriously. David looked around at the organized chaos of family life and realized he was exactly where he belonged. He had spent years climbing mountains to feel like he had accomplished something meaningful, but this was more meaningful than any summit he had ever reached. This was home. Part 5. A Real Family. The phone call came on a Tuesday evening while David was helping Tom with his math homework, and Lisa was braiding Bella's hair for school the next day. Amy answered the phone, and her face immediately changed from relaxed to worried. It's Grandpa Joe, she said, handing the phone to Lisa. Something's wrong. David watched Lisa's expression shift from concern to panic as she listened to her mother's voice on the other end. Lisa's father had collapsed at work and was being rushed to the hospital. Heart attack. We need to go, Lisa said, already moving toward the bedroom to pack. Mom can't handle this alone. Of course, David said without hesitation. I'll help you pack. What about your physical therapy appointment tomorrow? Lisa asked. And your follow-up with the doctor? I'll reschedule, David said. Family comes first. The word family still felt new in David's mouth, but it felt right. Lisa's father was family now, which meant his emergency was David's emergency too. 3 hours later, they were in the car driving through the night toward Lisa's hometown. The kids had packed quickly, understanding that Grandpa Joe needed them. Amy sat in the front seat helping David navigate while Tom and Bella dozed in the back. Thank you, Lisa said quietly as they drove through the darkness. For what? For not even hesitating. For just automatically knowing we needed to go together. David glanced at her. Where else would I be? They arrived at the hospital as the sun was coming up. Lisa's mother, Janet, looked exhausted and scared. She hugged Lisa tightly and then, to David's surprise, hugged him too. I'm so glad you came, Janet said. Joe's been asking about you. David had only met Lisa's father once, at a brief visit, a few months ago. Joe had been polite but cautious, clearly trying to figure out what kind of man had married his daughter in such unusual circumstances. How is he? Lisa asked. Stable, but they need to do surgery, Janet explained. His heart is damaged, but the doctors think they can fix it. The next few hours were a blur of waiting rooms and medical updates. The kids handled the stress with remarkable maturity. Amy kept Tom and Bella distracted with card games and coloring books. Tom asked thoughtful questions about how hearts worked. Bella drew pictures of flowers to give to Grandpa Joe when he woke up. David found himself naturally taking charge of practical things. He made sure everyone ate, contacted the kids' schools to explain their absence, and handled phone calls from relatives who wanted updates. You're good at crisis management, Janet observed during one of their coffee runs. I learned how to stay calm in emergencies from mountain climbing, David said. But this is scarier than any mountain I've ever climbed. Because it matters more, Janet said. Exactly. When Joe came out of surgery, the doctor said the procedure had gone well. He would need time to recover, but his prognosis was good. The family crowded into his hospital room, and Joe's eyes found David immediately. You came, Joe said weakly. Of course I came, David replied. Your family. Joe studied David's face for a long moment. Yes, he said finally. I think you are. Over the next week, David watched Lisa care for her father with the same fierce dedication she brought to everything else. She managed his medication schedule, advocated with doctors, and made sure he was comfortable. But David could see the stress wearing on her. You need to rest, David told her one evening after she had spent 12 hours at the hospital. I can't rest, Lisa said. He needs me. He needs you healthy, David countered. Go back to the hotel and sleep. I'll stay with him tonight. David, you don't have to. Yes, I do, David interrupted gently. That's what family does. David spent that night in an uncomfortable hospital chair, listening to machines beep and watching Joe sleep. Around 3 a.m, Joe woke up and seemed surprised to find David there instead of Lisa. She needed sleep, David explained. I told her I'd keep an eye on you. Joe was quiet for a while. Then he said, When Lisa first told me about your arrangement, I thought she was making a mistake. David waited for him to continue. I thought you were taking advantage of her situation. A young widow with 3 kids, you know. Seemed convenient for you. I understand why you would think that, David said. But watching you this week, Joe continued, I can see I was wrong. You love them. All of them. David felt that familiar crack in his chest. Yes, I do. When did it happen? When did it stop being an arrangement and start being real? David thought about the question. I think it was gradual. Like watching the sunrise, you don't see it happening moment by moment, but suddenly the world is bright. Joe smiled. That's a good answer. Your daughter is an amazing woman, David said. And your grandchildren are incredible kids. I'm the lucky one in this deal. I can see that, Joe said. I can also see they're lucky to have you. The crisis brought unexpected moments of connection. Amy, who had been carefully polite to David for months, broke down crying in the hospital cafeteria when she thought no one was looking. Hey, David said, sitting down next to her. What's going on? I'm scared, Amy admitted. First Daddy died, then Mom got sick, now Grandpa Joe. What if everyone I love just keeps leaving? David's heart broke for this 12-year-old who had learned too young that bad things could happen to good people. I can't promise that bad things won't happen, David said honestly. But I can promise that I'm not going anywhere. Whatever happens, you're stuck with me. Amy looked at him through her tears. Really? Really? I'm officially part of this family now, which means I'm officially not allowed to leave. It's in the contract. Amy almost smiled. There's no contract. There is now, David said. Written, in permanent ink. I, David, promise to be Amy's annoying stepdad forever and ever. You're not that annoying, Amy said. Give me time, David grinned. That night, Amy knocked on the door of David's hotel room. Can I ask you something, she said. Always. Would you adopt us? Legally, I mean. So we're really your kids, not just Mom's kids that you take care of. David stared at her, speechless. I've been thinking about it, Amy continued. If something happened to Mom, we don't have any legal connection to you. You couldn't make decisions for us or anything. And I want you to be able to. I want us to be your real family. David had to sit down. Amy, that's a big decision. I know. But I've been watching you for almost a year now. You show up for everything. You remember Tom's soccer games and Bella's art shows. You help me with homework even when I'm being difficult. You stayed all night with Grandpa Joe because you knew Mom needed sleep. David felt tears starting in his eyes. That's what dads do, Amy said simply. And you're our dad now, even if the paperwork doesn't say so yet. 3 months later, David found himself standing in a courthouse wearing his best shirt and holding legal documents that would officially make him the father of 3 children. Lisa stood next to him, also nervous but smiling. Amy, Tom, and Bella sat in the front row with Janet and Joe, who had recovered well from his surgery. The judge was the same one who had handled David and Lisa's marriage, and she seemed pleased to see them back under happier circumstances. This is an unusual case, the judge said. Usually adoption proceedings involve biological parents giving up their rights. But in this case, we're adding a parent to a family that clearly wants and needs him. The legal process was surprisingly emotional. When the judge asked David if he understood the lifelong commitment he was making, David's voice cracked as he said yes. When she asked the children if they wanted David to be their legal father, all three of them said yes without hesitation. Then by the power vested in me by the state, I grant this adoption, the judge announced. Congratulations to the whole family. Bella ran up to David immediately. Are you officially my papa now? Officially and forever, David said, picking her up. Tom and Amy were more reserved, but David could see the relief and happiness in their faces. They had been through enough uncertainty for one childhood. Now they had something permanent. That evening, the family went out to dinner to celebrate. At the restaurant, Bella announced loudly to anyone who would listen that David was her real papa now, not just her almost papa. What's the difference? The waitress asked, charmed by Bella's enthusiasm. Real papas are forever, Bella explained, seriously. Almost papas might leave, but real papas promise to stay. David looked around the table at his family, his wife, who had become his best friend and partner in everything, his daughter Amy, who was growing into a remarkable young woman, his son Tom, who brought joy and curiosity to every day, his youngest daughter Bella, who had taught him that love could be as simple as sharing crayons. A year and a half ago, David had been a lonely man talking to mountains. Now he was surrounded by people who loved him, trusted him, and needed him. People who called him Papa and meant it. Speech, Tom called out. Papa should make a speech. David stood up, feeling slightly ridiculous but also deeply happy. I'm not good at speeches, he began. That's okay, Amy said. Just say what you're thinking. David looked at Lisa, who nodded encouragingly. I used to think that being independent was the same thing as being strong, David said. I thought needing people was a weakness, but you all taught me that the strongest thing you can do is love people and let them love you back. He paused, feeling emotional again. I thought I was rescuing Lisa when we got married, but really, all of you rescued me.